Scott and Srini, we will record this because there's many of our returners have reached out to us from India and it's pretty late for them. We want to make sure we share it with the returners who are not able to join us today.
Sure.
Makes sense.
Hello, everyone. Rihanna here. I'm
Hi,
an
Rihanna.
ex-employee. Yeah, this is my first meeting in this WBW. So I'm so
Welcome.
excited to.
Yeah, so glad to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are you an ex-employee? What company did you work with last time?
Cisco.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. All right, good. We're very glad to have you.
Thank you.
Okay, maybe we can get started because I know folks will still be joining. Welcome to, hi Mamta, nice to have you here. Welcome to all our returners. We're very excited that we're hosting another Power Hour. Srini and Scott, welcome to both of you. Thank you for taking the time and being here. Just as a background, some of our returners may remember Monique Edmondson, who was one of the speakers, and she talked about building your tribe, very powerful. And she's a huge advocate for the Women Back to Work program, also at Cisco. And when she was speaking to us, she said, well, you know, I'm going to volunteer Scott and Srini to speak about AI because we're trying to figure out what would be good topics. And, you know, she connected us to Srini and Scott, and here we are. So thank you again. This means a lot to our returners. The Power Hour, we've been doing this for about 8 years, every Tuesday. I think we recently calculated the number of power hours we've done, and it's over 500. So that's you know, that many hours of educating, coaching, mentoring our returners every Tuesday. So it is our dedicated time. I won't take too much time, but Scott is a software engineer at Cisco and Srini Atluri is a principal architect at Cisco. So I'm going to hand it over, and the plan is if you share your presentation, and then at the end, we'll certainly have Q&A. Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and Nisha and I will moderate it. And towards the end, we will certainly ask those questions, but we also wanted to open live so you can ask your questions as well. All right, Scott and Srini, over to you.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Cool.
And if there's a burning question you want to ask us in the middle, that's fine too.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. You know, hopefully we make Monique proud. Monique is a great speaker as well.
Of course, yeah. Yeah, so yeah, my name is Srini Atluri, and thanks so much for the opportunity, and I'll be presenting with my colleague Scott Berkner here. So we have been doing this, Scott and I have been doing this presentation for a while, and it's been, I think we started this a year ago internally for our team when the ChatGPT suddenly exploded into the scene, and then everybody started thinking about what are the neural networks, what are LLMs, and what are the GPTs and all of that stuff, and how we could leverage that in the company. And this presentation has been evolving, and it's so rapidly evolving. We've been updating it literally every month, and we have to say we're really excited about this whole space in general. And initially it looked like a, you know, something like a bubble, or just like how crypto and NFTs were a couple of years ago, but we feel that this is actually a massive opportunity and a revolution. We actually feel this is probably bigger than the personal computers or internet or mobile phones and all of that. So this is going to affect all of us and has already started affecting all of us. So it's a great thing for us to be aware of it, learn, and even embrace it in some way. And that's so. This is an attempt in, you know, just bringing everyone up to speed. Some of the topics here are a little bit technical, but yeah, feel free to ask us questions anytime you want. So just going back, just to give you a background, you all must have been familiar we all must have been, hearing about artificial intelligence, and I myself worked on artificial intelligence and expert systems 30 years ago. But what we are seeing in the last few years is nothing like what was earlier. This is definitely revolutionary. And the main changes happen with something called deep learning, and that's based on a field called neural networks. So neural networks have been around for the last 70 years, nothing really new there. They mimic the human brain. So the idea is that instead of telling the computer, like in traditional programming, step by step in an algorithm exactly what it needs to do, you basically present examples of inputs and outputs to the system and let it figure out the program. So that's the difference that's a paradigm change, right? So, and that's exactly how humans and human babies learn. That's how we learn, right? And so neural networks have been around, but they didn't really take off because they really need very powerful hardware. Even with all the Intel chips and supercomputers, so-called supercomputers, they were not sufficiently powerful to run the neural networks at the capacity equivalent to human brain. And something started changing because of the gaming industry. NVIDIA mainly, they started building what are called GPUs, graphic processing units, to enable the games to be run fast or rendered very quickly. And the same GPUs, and they do a lot of matrix multiplication, matrix calculations really fast. And neural networks and the transformers inside need exactly similar kind of calculations. And so it just happened that running neural networks on these GPUs that are actually meant to be for games really became powerful new AI tool for us. And so that's the background. And next slide, please. So as you know, it started evolving. Google made major advances in this, and then based on that, OpenAI a couple of years ago they built this ChatGPT, and that completely took the world by surprise. And it's as you can see, it's really powerful. First time we are seeing human-like responses from these systems. And the thing with the way OpenAI built ChatGPT, OpenAI is the company behind ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is the interface that we use to talk to a model that's running at the back end in the OpenAI cloud, and the model is called GPT, stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. These models come in different versions. Right now, we're using the free version, is like GPT 3.5, and there's a paid version, GPT-4 and GPT Turbo. They're all called large language models. Basically, they are trained on the public content that's available in the World Wide Web, like Wikipedia, New York Times, and some questions and answers, curated questions and answers from OpenAI employees, so that all the internal biases are somewhat removed, not fully. And the model can be, we're saying it's comparing with the car and engine. So just like an engine can be replaced in a car, you can have different models running in the ChatGPT. And that's what we choose when we go to the environment. Next slide, please. So ChatGPT is very, or open, GPTs or LLMs are really powerful in language generation. As you can see, the two examples here, you can say they get like A+ in terms of a language generation, as well as summarizing what's on the web. So I have two completely different examples, and you can see the power of the model here, whether in terms of the Shakespearean-like language or consolidating and simplifying all that information that's out there for us, and giving it a simple, concise, precise answer. Next one, please. So you can see the image. It's this generative AI, which is basically AI generating content for you. That's why it's called generative AI. it's a lot more than just simple conversations. It can generate images, presentation slides, and you can now Office 365 from Microsoft has a Copilot in which you can actually build an entire presentation just by conversing with the tool. So you can say, generate a presentation on, let's say, OpenAI's ChatGPT, and then you can start telling us what to include, what not, and it keeps updating. If you see the image on this picture, I asked it to generate an image of a programmer working next to a reflective lake, and I said it needs to be like a Van Gogh image, and you can see it creating this, and it literally generated under a minute. So it's very powerful, as you can see. And then in terms of other things, it can generate code. Some of you must have used Copilot, GitHub Copilot, where you describe, like you can say, build me a client and server or a full stack application in React with a Java backend talking to Oracle. You can describe like that and give certain functionalities, and it will generate the entire skeleton code for you, ready to go. So this used to take, let's say, a week earlier, and so gives you a head start. And this is what turns some of the programmers into 10x programmers, and it gets the 10x type of productivity for engineers. Google has an equivalent, and that's called Gemini. That's just like ChatGPT. You can also use Gemini from Google. And Google integrated it in some cases with the search for certain users. Now you start seeing, when you do Google search, you start seeing the summaries from Gemini or right there. If you ever want to build an AI app completely from ground up, your own thing, you want to train on your own proprietary content, and you have a lot of money and resources, then there are three popular choices. You have AWS Bedrock, Google Vertex, or Microsoft Azure platforms. You can actually go there and build, train, and do everything without using anything from OpenAI or anybody else. But they're, as I said, very expensive choices, because you need GPUs, and you need correct type of data, and you need data scientists who can come up with the right algorithms and things like that. Next slide, please. Yeah. So you just for a sample, I put this is like how it's taking over most of our jobs and roles. This is the Cosmopolitan cover that they generated in like 20 seconds. They asked it to generate a female warrior president walking on Mars, and this is what it generated in like 20 seconds. So that's the first magazine cover that they used with AI. Just as a caveat, as you're using ChatGPT, the free version, it's not updated after. It's only trained till data from September 2021. So if you ask it anything latest, like let's say who won the Super Bowl in 2024 or 2023, it wouldn't know, right? And sometimes it makes up, it hallucinates and makes up some random answers. So you need to be a little bit careful when you're looking at the answers it comes up with. And also the other thing that you need to think about is, because it's only, like I said, any neural network is only as good as the input and output examples it's been presented during training. So if the training set is biased, then the AI will have the same biases. So for example, are humans good or bad for the planet? Let's say you ask that question to ChatGPT. Now, if ChatGPT just generally read only what's out there in the news, then it could easily conclude that humans are bad for the planet. Because if you read the news, there's nothing, 90% of the news is about the bad people, right? Very rarely we see something that people have done something good in the news. So it could easily get biased, thinking people are bad for the planet. So if AI ever gets powerful, And if it has this bias, then, that's not good for us. So, but in general, whether it's uh, racial bias or gender bias or anything else, or a country of origin, it's very likely that the responses from ChatGPT or OpenAI can have these biases in them. And so we need to be careful. If we are exposing this information to our employees, we need to be careful about that and watchful for that. So what we are, as a best practice, what we do is we actually filter the responses that are coming back and make sure that there's nothing really bad in them, in bad words or anything, any biased information. And also, when you're uploading your company data to OpenAI and ask questions on it, there is a small risk that this data could be to leaked by OpenAI to train, or can be used by OpenAI to train future models, like let's say GPT-5. So you need to be careful about what data you're putting in. It's best to anonymize things so that you don't actually take real names of your employees or your customers or any other real information. You should be careful not to put in your tax information, things like that. So yeah. So those are some of the caveats that we need to follow when you're using the APIs or the public ChatGPT interface. Next one, please. So this is an example of a limitation with ChatGPT. So you keep getting different answers for the same question based on, as you keep trying. If you say answer again, you could end up with a real answer, correct answer. But I've seen multiple times you're giving the wrong answer. So as you can see, it's not like adding more cars is not like adding more people. So the time should not change at all. But it does equate it to adding more workers to the job. So it says the time taken is half, which is incorrect. So this is just an example of where we need to be watchful and careful about the answers it's giving. The LLMs are really good with language and English in general. They are not so good with logic, as you can see here. Yeah. Next slide, please. So these are some of the examples of where you could use a virtual assistant in a typical enterprise. Again, this doesn't say we are using this way, but in general, some samples that you can do. Definitely, all of your employee-facing sites or customer-facing sites, you could have a chat interface. So chat could be the next, you can say, evolution of a user interface. Actually, there's no reason for people to look around menus and sub-menus and find things. They could just, in nice English, they could just ask whatever they want and be directed to the correct site, right? So that's one thing. And you could, now if you look at something like employee benefit guide, it's literally 100 pages. Instead of reading through what benefit I have, for example, for certain leave or medical leave or whatever, I could just ask a simple question against the document and get an answer. And that will be company specific information, so very relevant to what I'm looking for. Same way, I could say, find out my PTO or my vacation information, how much leave balance I have. That's the HR information I'm referring to here. So you could do a lot from just conversing with the interface. You could order from catalogs, you could, and also this other thing, translation of content, that's a big challenge for us. Most of the content is in English, but then we have employees all over the world. So let's say someone is trying to ask a question in Japanese. So it could translate, let's say, a certain instructions to, let's say, set up your computer. It can actually translate and answer that in Japanese. So that's one advantage we have out of the box without having to do anything. This is all employees directly interacting with it, but we could also do things in the background automatically. For example, we could look at some employees' laptop data coming from an employee's laptop and say the battery is not charging fully, and say, okay, it looks like the battery is not working, and we could just ship a new battery to them automatically. if they're working from home, for example. So these are some of the things we could do in the backend automatically. So those are the use cases that we're looking forward to. Next one, please. So literally everybody is trying to solve this problem, which is OpenAI is great. It answers all the questions that I have with the information that is there in the public web. But let's say I want answers based on my own company document. So for example, like I said earlier, our benefit policy could be very different. My 401k provider could be very different, right? So I want to ask those questions. Now, how do we do that? So that's a challenge that every company is facing right now. A couple of popular challenges, and um, actually the two popular options that quickly get you started, limited expertise and limited upfront cost. And there's one very expensive thing, which is the building your own LLM and running it on your own. The two simple choices are, of course, the easiest one I would start with is without any having to code or write anything, is the Microsoft Copilot. Especially if you are a Microsoft shop already and you have all of your documents in SharePoint, then Microsoft Copilot Studio, this got released just a few weeks ago. You can just set up a Copilot for your workplace and then point to all the websites that you wanted to index, which could be your SharePoint sites or your homepage. And then you can also point to a bunch of documents that you wanted to read, like your employee benefits guide, things like that. And then that's it. It's ready to go. You need to pay some upfront fee. After that, your employees can start asking it questions about, any of that content. It will give you answers. So this can be set up in just a couple of days and you're ready to go. That's probably the easiest choice. The second one would be what's called RAG, or Retrieval Augmented Generation. It's also a very popular solution. I'll explain that in more detail in the next slide. You can go to the next slide. Yeah. So basically, the challenge here, the idea here is that you are going to have a backend with OpenAI. You will have an API license with them, and then the biggest challenge right now is, let's say we are a company like Cisco. We have hundreds of thousands of documents, so we can't send all of that to OpenAI. So we can only send few documents in a call to OpenAI, and then based on those documents in the API call, it can answer questions. So sorry, this is a little bit technical. This is more meant for engineers, but I'll just quickly go over it. You can ask me questions if you have. The idea is that you pre-filter the documents doing your own initial local search and pull up the relevant documents, and then send those relevant documents to OpenAI along with the user question, and then it will be able to answer the question based on only on the document that you thought are good fit. So this is a way you kind of cut down the size of the data that you need to send to OpenAI, because you do get charged by the amount of data you send to OpenAI call. Yeah. Next question. Next slide, please. Yeah. So I'll let Scott take over from here. He has some great examples.
Yeah. Hey, so I'm Scott Berkner. If you missed the introduction, I'm a software engineer at Cisco. I've been at Cisco for a couple years, and I'm gonna kind of talk to you about more of like the use cases from that point of view. Give some examples, and kind of dive a little bit deeper into Copilot, both GitHub Copilot and Microsoft Copilot. So if you're, on the business side, or if you're on the software side, I'll go into a little bit more of the details from that point of view. So first I want to start with Gen AI for business. And this is kind of more public Gen AI, like if we were to use ChatGPT or something like that. Some of the features that we can use it to describe like functionalities of tools like Excel, Miro, like a lot of the more, popular ones that maybe if you're new, you don't know about yet how to use, like, oh, how do I get a function for this? It might give you that. It can write you some emails, and it can, format data and interpret the data. but we also do have to be careful not to give away confidential information. Some of the features to avoid, we don't want to summarize our slides, copy and paste Excel sheet data, or just kind of use data analysis in general, just because if it's public, Srini kind of touched on it, but if it's public, then we have a high risk for exposure. So we don't want to, give away that confidential information. Some of the considerations, like I said, we don't want to give away private data. Make sure that it's accurate. So the information that it's generating, make sure that in the provided context that it's accurate. And that's kind of on us. Just make sure that we're following good practices and we're not just over reliant on a tool that we don't fully understand, and that we're double checking our work. Another big thing is every business has their own policies. So we got to make sure that if we're using this, that we're complying to every specific business's policies, because it's better safe than sorry. So for the first example, I wanted to use Gemini, which is it's very similar to ChatGPT, but it's trained on the most recent data and it's free. So I was like, hey, maybe I haven't been up to date with the newest technologies of the past year, maybe for whatever reason, I just haven't been doing that. So I said, explain to me the newest technologies of the past year. Just, a very simple catch up. And then within, 7 seconds or so, it talks about, AI, computing, and then like some other things that we haven't even thought of. Like sustainability, energy, robotics, like the metaverse, like this will give you very very summary based stuff. And then from there, I'm interested in bioprinting. So now I can deep dive into that. And maybe I don't use AI, but it gave me a head start and got me to a very good starting spot. Next, it's more enterprise related, but Microsoft 365 Copilot. It is a tool offered in the Microsoft Office that is kind of like a private instance, and it's more specific to our companies. So it's grounded in our business data, and it gives like answers based on the data that we feed it. So it will, be very good at picking up context clues and kind of have an idea of what we're talking about. Since it's so like integrated in the Microsoft Office, we can use it in, meetings, Outlook, Word documents, Excel, just a ton of different places. In meetings, it's very useful. Let's say, I'm a director or something, and I have 5 different teams, and I'm in 3 different meetings at once. It allows me to get summaries from all 3 of those meetings and kind of get an idea of what they're all talking about without kind of having to guess and choose. Because like in meetings, it will provide real-time summaries, like discussion points, and then like action items. So, same with Outlook. So if there's, if I have 3 email threads that are 20 emails each, and I really just want a quick summary and not spend 2 hours trying to figure out what each one is talking about, it'll catch me up with summaries and action items as well. And then in Excel, it'll look at trends, and you can say summarize this data, or create charts based on this data, and it'll generate that for you. And I have an example in the next slide that I'll show you in a second that'll kind of illustrate it a little better. Some of the considerations, this is a subscription-based model, so it does cost money. While it is great, it might have a cost to it as well. We got to make sure that it doesn't affect our effort, because if everything is so easy, we still got to put our own creative side to it as well, and make sure that we're actually understanding it as well, and not just completely reliant on this tool. And also, kind of goes hand in hand with that. We want to make sure that we fact check everything and make sure that it works properly and that what it's telling us is actually correct. So I used an example of the Microsoft. This is actually their first commercial. They made another one for the Super Bowl. I don't know if you guys saw it, but this is the first commercial they came out with for Copilot. So yeah, I just wanted to show you that 40-second clip from it. But yeah, as you can see that there's a lot of places in the Microsoft Office that you can actually use this tool. And it's really cool, all the use cases that we can get out of it. So yeah, now transitioning kind of to the software engineering, which is like where I like to use it because I'm an engineer myself. So I actually find myself using Gen AI all the time. Like I was actually using it earlier today. So one of the capabilities, one of my personal favorites is that it'll generate code blocks and snippets for us. And we just give it a little summary, give it like 3 or 4 things that we want it to generate, and it'll give us a very good, not perfect, but a very good skeleton of the code that we want to do. So it might save us that initial 3-4 hours of us trying to write that skeleton out. It'll give us information on new technologies and development tools, and it can outweigh pros and cons of each. And it can provide alternate solutions in case you don't understand the original one, because obviously we want to understand our code. So if it generates code, it might work, but if I don't understand it, I shouldn't use it or use anything like it, because then if someone asks me to explain it, I don't know what I'm talking about. So I want to use something that I understand. Features to avoid, especially on a public instance, is we don't want to generate test cases on a public instance, because we're copy and pasting code, which could be company information, which is sometimes private, a lot of times private. And kind of same with the complex documentation. Like anything where we have to copy and paste code into something public is probably not a good idea, unless we very filter the information and make it so it's very unrecognizable at that point. Some of the considerations is the quality. The code might be right, but it might not be optimal, or past security guidelines, especially if we're using something like ChatGPT, where it was trained on 2021, like at the latest 2022 information. There's a lot of security risks that may have arisen by then, and newer versions to different technologies. So if we are using everything that's most up to date from 2020, 2021, 2022, that might not be, the most optimal way to write our code in 2024. So those are things to consider as well. And, kind of similar to how there's Microsoft Copilot, there's GitHub Copilot, which is more geared towards coding. Something that's cool about GitHub Copilot is that it operates right in our environments. So, it will be hand in hand right as you're coding. GitHub Copilot is right there with you. So it can, provide coding suggestions and, write test cases right in front of you. And, those are some of the use cases. It can write documentation. And I know that me as a developer, I personally struggle a lot with writing a lot of documentation. So having something to write it for you is actually really nice, and it's really useful. It knocks out a lot of that busy work that we really don't want to do, where writing test cases, and a lot of coders have seen it at one point or another, where there's lazy written test cases that might pass and they might give coverage, but they don't really mean anything. And GitHub Copilot can make them mean something, which is really good. And there was a study done. There was 100 developers split into 50 groups of 50 each, and on average, the ones that use Copilot on like a 2-3 hour project saved about 90 minutes. So that's a significant amount of time. Yeah. Some of the considerations, we don't want to be over reliant, kind of the same thing as Microsoft 365 Copilot. We don't want to be over reliant on it. Make sure that we don't have security vulnerabilities. Although, funny enough, actually Copilot's very good at detecting these, but we still want to be careful. Same as always, it's our code. So if we're writing it, we want to be able to understand it and make sure that we're accountable for it. And yeah, that's it. Other than that, for examples of this, GitHub Copilot, we see it right here. and it's writing test cases right here as well. So we just copy this, say, write a test case for this, and then it'll write this test case for us. And then an example of how we would use ChatGPT. I kind of did this so it was more vague. So I would say, how would I make a div, like, container with these three things? And ChatGPT will generate this code for me, and it'll give me the HTML, the CSS, and it'll give me a description of what it's actually doing. So that way I can kind of, I can actually use this and, be successful with it without giving out any information. And it'll just give me a very general skeleton. Some of the bad use cases, we've touched on this a bunch of times, but copying complete coding blocks, such as this. I can't even read that, but basically just don't copy and paste a bunch of code. If it has anything to do with a company specific API, we probably shouldn't ask a Gen AI platform that's public and use like internal documentation, just because, that's very private information. In terms of business use cases, we don't want to use specific names. Srini kind of touched on this, or personally confidential information. Example, I had write a thank you email from Scott and Srini to the Women Back at Work team for having us on to speak about AI. While that's like while we're thankful, we don't want to say that into a public platform for sure. And then raw data either. We don't want to put raw data in a public instance as well. Yeah, so for everyday use in a pop culture, for us, it can generate recipes. I think Srini had an example earlier of that. It can write a cover letter based on your resume and the information of the position that you're applying for. So we can copy the position, copy our resume, ask ChatGPT, hey, can you write a cover letter for me based on this position and what I have on my resume? And it'll do it for you, and it'll do a pretty good job as well. It can give you analysis that a novice or a seasoned expert could find useful. So I could say, explain to me, AI if I was a fifth grader. Explain to me AI if I was a Harvard grad student. It might give you two completely different answers, and it will give you two completely different answers that, differ in complexity as well. It can also impersonate famous celebrities, like can write a recipe from Gordon Ramsay. It's appeared on commercials. There's a really good one with Ryan Reynolds. It's pretty funny. He uses ChatGPT to generate the whole commercial. It's pretty good. It had over 100 million users in the first 2 months of being public, which was at the time the fastest by far. I think Threads passed it, and it was a little bit faster than ChatGPT to reach that 100 million. And every 2 to 3 weeks, ChatGPT writes as many words as every book in the world. So yeah, thank you guys for coming to our presentation. I wanted in the spirit of the Super Bowl, Taylor Swift was really big in the Super Bowl, so I wanted to say a goodbye and thank you for coming to my presentation in the voice of Taylor Swift. And yeah, it generates a little something. So yeah, thank you guys again, and appreciate you guys giving us the time to present on this.
Thank you, Srini. Thank you, Scott. The chat is on fire. So I am going to try. Srini and Scott, would you're done, right, with your presentation? So we can move to Q&A? Okay. Okay. So there's a lot of questions here.
Sorry, do you want me to
questions here. No, sorry, Scott, what was that?
Oh, do you want me to keep sharing? Do you want me to stop?
No, unless you have more presentation, because then I can ask you, we can ask you the questions. There's a lot of questions in the chat, and we have about 18 minutes. So I think I clubbed some of these questions mostly for career for women, and maybe I'll ask them first. And Srini or Scott, whoever would like to answer that. I think there was more questions from returners around how do they upscale in the area of AI? What are AI opportunities for non-AI people? Are there any jobs, within for people who have web development skills but don't have computer science or machine learning, what advice or tip would you have for returners who are looking to leverage generative AI in career transition? So I think there's a lot of questions around career transition. So, what would be your thoughts around if someone had to, they had web development background, they had banking background, they had medical background, someone didn't have computer science, machine learning. How do women who have a gap in their career build, pivot or build some career around this?
Yeah. So I can go first and then Scott can add to that. I mean, the clearly different types of jobs are opening up now because the core programming itself, like I said, is becoming highly specialized. So if you leave those things out, actually building the deep learning systems themselves, then the new types of jobs are, for example, verifying that the responses are valid. That's becoming very important, critical. So when we build a new LLM or come up with a new solution, how do we know it's not answering something, or it's not saying something politically incorrect or is not appropriate or things like that, right? So validating that is becoming very critical. So getting any such skills is a great thing. Number two, most of these models have gaps in their knowledge because the training sets, data sets are only, they're only so good. So there are always these areas where there are gaps and or even ambiguities in the because world is full of ambiguous information, and it's trying to, unlike Google search, this thing has to give you a single answer. So how do you come up with that, right? So there are some cases where it's not possible, like I don't know, like which phone, which OS is better, Android or iOS. Again, it's subjective, so I guess that's fine. But there are areas where clearly answer can be given. So content creators or people who are fixing the content that's out there to make sure that a certain answer gets the existing model answers get overridden. So that's becoming a new type of job. And then prompt engineering, clearly. So how do we asking the same question differently gives you different answers. Sometimes it actually gives you correct answer versus incorrect answer. So prompt engineering is also becoming pretty popular. So these are the high level categories I can think of. Scott, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think like it's obviously expanding to every area. Like we see it in even law, like a lot of law students use it, a lot of people in law use it in general. To kind of elaborate a little bit more on the prompt engineering, it's a growing field, and I actually have been studying it a little bit more. Like I was at a workshop the other week for it, and a lot of how they write is very different than how we might think, but it's very, very good for having the actual AI understand it. So there's a lot of new interesting fields like prompt engineering that have arisen because of AI.
Would you recommend any free sources for self-learning, or are there any courses that are out there that our returners could benefit from or take these courses?
There are no easy, straight questions. I mean, some of their YouTube videos, but using ChatGPT itself as a resource seems to be a good thing. So, for example, you could ask exactly the questions that you're asking. If you ask ChatGPT, there's a great chance actually that will give you an answer better than what I can give, and that's a beauty. And I'm using this all the time to let's say I want to learn about something about a new crypto, like what Ethereum is or what Ethereum protocol is. I can just ask the question as it is, and it's giving me great answers. So just cultivating that habit of, when Google first came around, we would not use Google to ask questions about Unix command line or something, right? So we would not do that. But now it's so normal. If you get an error, people just copy paste it into Google and see what happens. So same thing. If you just make it a habit, that this is one of the great sources to go to, most likely it will be fine.
In some other questions, do you see GPTs being domain specific, and will that be used in various industries?
Yeah, I think that's the two customizing thing I talked about, the RAG. Actually, RAG is the very popular thing where customizing to your industry or customizing to your enterprise, your own data. That's where you can supply some of this extra document, let's say medical documents or legal information, and then it'll be able to parse and understand and answer questions.
Is Cisco using enterprise level chat GPT to get around confidentiality, privacy issues? And if yes, if you could elaborate on the process of removing biases, or even other companies, are they using this to get around these confidentiality issues?
Yeah, so one thing that I think most big companies are doing is getting their own private instances of OpenAI, where all of your stuff is hosted on Azure just for you privately. So you're not hitting the public one. And then, so one advantage is all of your data is sandboxed, and they'll guarantee that your data is not leaked out. And then, in terms of making sure the biases, yeah, we all have other systems fronting that. That's it in between employees and this backend of OpenAI that look for data, going in and coming out to make sure that employees are not sending anything proprietary, as well as when data is coming back, we make sure that it's not saying anything inappropriate. So both sides we have filters. God, do you want to add something?
Yeah. No, no, you pretty much covered it.
Okay. Does 365 Copilot have access to MS Suite or apps, or can it access Google as well?
So from what I understand, like when I played around with the custom GPT or Copilot customizing Copilot, you can actually you can point it to whatever sites you want to. That could be Google, but then you need to obviously give it correct authentication and everything so that it can actually pull data from Google, and then it can index after that.
Let's see if there's any more. Other than Microsoft Copilot, do we have any free tool available for generative AI?
That would be, I mean, like the Gemini is one, and then like ChatGPT. There's free tiers to both. If we're looking for something more up to date, obviously Gemini is the most trained up to date for free. And if we're looking for pictures as well, like there's Dolly for pictures is free. So across different sectors of AI, there's free tiers for stuff. But to my knowledge, I'm pretty sure that it's Microsoft Office, the 365, and GitHub Copilot are both pay to use, and I don't think there are free tiers to those.
Scott, this question is also for you. Can we use the data set in Microsoft 365 Copilot to get the prediction on based input and labeled output variable?
I think that kind of goes with like the expected. I want to say like it can the context, so it will kind of understand the context. I think if I'm understanding that question correctly, like it can kind of look at the context around what you're writing and know about the subject that you're writing about based on the data that the Microsoft Copilot has, and it'll give you stuff that's accurate to what you're like contextually accurate to what you're writing about.
Can AI do video editing?
Not yet, but I'm sure it's coming soon. They have things that can generate music already. Like you can say generate with this artist voice with this type of instrument. and then pictures definitely. But I think the video capabilities are they're clearly available within the companies like Google, but not publicly available.
And I may be repeating some questions, so bear with me. Rashna asked this question: how is security controlled with Gen AI in an organization, and how can software testing help in Gen AI?
So security, I think clearly one thing like I mentioned, making sure that you have your own instance in Azure or something is the best way, so that your documents don't get leaked or get accessed by somebody else. When you talk about, I think a bigger concern is privacy of individual data. So the model shouldn't learn from me, my personal private information, and respond back saying, when you ask a question, let's say a medical question, they say, yeah, Srini also has the same issue. And then you can talk to Srini or something like that. So you don't want that kind of an answer. So making sure that individuals' responses are only looking at only their data, nothing else, just like a human agent would do. Those are some of the best practices that we need to follow, and we have some security practices that we are putting in place to make sure that will happen. And in terms of sorry, the second part was testing.
Yes, it was testing. Yes.
Yeah. For testing,
how
I think
can the question is, how can software testing help in Gen AI?
Yeah, like I said, more than software testing, it's more of a validating that it's answering all the questions correctly and not saying anything inappropriate. I think those are the testing. It's not really testing the software itself.
Was that more like in general though, like in terms of like how to software testing, or
This was actually this was specifically for the software testing as such, how it will change in the AI as such. And the thing is, you were mentioning about the test cases and the business cases that are written by the AI. So, I mean, in that context, basically.
okay.
Yeah. Good.
Can you repeat that one more time? I'm sorry, I missed a little bit of that. So in the in terms of in the software space, testing like our code, you mean?
Basically, what Srini mentioned about the validation part,
Okay.
similar ground. If I mean, currently, how software testing can help in AI as such. Just the validation part would be an important area to look at, or should I mean, if one has to transit in the a software testing person wants to transit in an AI related field, so what area should he or she look at?
Yeah,
Srini?
I mean, Scott, I can go. Yeah. So I think, like we said earlier, previously the testing used to be like, code coverage and things like that, right? So, um, and then I think it's similar in the sense that you are generating. It's mostly you're asking questions that are edge cases that can. It's not exactly like changing the input variable to try a value with 1 and then 10 or -1, and that's how it used to be earlier, the testing. Here the testing is more of obviously natural language type of prompts, so that's where it's very different. And then validating the answers for fact checking the answers and making sure that in case of ambiguous situations it's answering correctly. So those are the main things.
Okay. What jobs or components of jobs at Cisco may be replaced by Gen AI, or I mean, even at other companies?
We're not, I don't think at this point. So this is more like I think a productivity enhancing tool as of today. I don't think we are there to, I don't think any jobs will be replaced by this.
This is a very interesting question by Priya. She says, I know AI can answer most factual questions, but here is a different question. What are your thoughts on professional women taking a break from their careers, especially for caring for young children or another member of the family? And do you feel like this is valuable to our society at large?
Yeah, I mean, if you think, for example, like one-on-one tutoring, right? I can easily see, um, with young children, parents have to spend so much time teaching them, reading stories, and I can see picture books and all those things replaced one day by. I know kids are already using iPads, or babies are using iPads, but I can see that whole thing becoming interactive and actually, uh, you know, know what baby is looking at and answer, and even understand what baby is saying, and then ask questions back. And so I'm saying we can probably, instead of just leaving them in front of TV, I'm sure some of these apps can take care of, make it more interactive and actually make it intelligent for them. And in terms of caring for elders, there are so many companies already looking at setting up cameras, video cameras, for example, and detecting, for example, if a person is having some sort of a difficulty, like an elderly person is having a heart attack, or they slipped and fell down, something like that. So these things can detect and inform people. So I think every area is going to be touched radically.
Yeah, absolutely. And Srini and Scott and Priya, Cisco is a huge advocate for women returning to work in 2019, 2020, 2021. There have been multiple returnships for returners. And it's just, last year was a very, kind of an anomaly of a year. But we are hoping that Cisco will come back, and especially groups like Moni will come back and want to hire returners. And that is exactly what, Priya, the answer to your question is. Cisco and other companies care for women who are going back to work, because you bring that diversity of experience, diversity of thought, and even in fields like machine learning and AI. So you are of great value. That's why we all work very hard to bring you back to work. But I know we're just right on time at 1. I'm sorry if there were some questions that were not answered. We're happy to take a look at what was not answered. We can send it to you, Scott and Srini, and if you had a moment, if you could answer them, and we'll pass them along to our returners. But
Sure.
any last piece of advice for our returners from both of you?
Yeah, I mean, I can say I definitely think that it's worth looking into 100%. In the past year, this is one of the novelist tools, but everyone's like new to it. So since everyone's new to it, like, no one's behind. So there's definitely a ton of time to catch up if you're behind on it, and it might seem, like it's a lot, but a lot of this has come out and been popular in the past year. So, there's a lot of time to learn.
Yep, that's a great point. Yep.
Shraddha, you wanted to get a picture?